Hi, and welcome to Random Walks in HR with me, Tim Peppers, and it's great to be back. Sorry, it's been a bit of a hiatus since my last video, but what I have been up to is studying for Masters in People Analytics, and I wanted to do another video, and we'll be doing 2 more videos in the next week. Is because I need some help with this, because I am about to embark on my final thesis, my final project, and I kind of need some help and some feedback, because I think I might be mad. So, let me pitch to you an idea, and I'd love to get your comments, or please reach out to me directly if you want to discuss, if you think this idea is good, if you could help people analytics as a whole, or whether actually this seems completely insane. So, what is pitch idea number 1? Well, we're going to tackle the big question of productivity. Bad news for people analytics, if you are not currently in our sector, is that we don't know how to measure it. And that's awkward because really people analytics should be all about boosting productivity. We should be getting more productivity from employees, but we can't measure it, which is awkward because we're the people analytics team and we really should be able to measure people's stuff. So, I have an idea of how we can potentially measure productivity. Or more to the point, baseball has an idea about how we can measure productivity, and I want to steal it. There's a guy called Bill James. I'm not going to get into him in this one. There'll be another podcast later on about Bill James and his impact through baseball, felt all the way through people analytics, but he is essentially a statistician who really enjoyed baseball and wrote a book, and he created in that book a metric called wins above replacement. It's a really interesting metric that basically boils down any individual baseball player's contribution to a team's performance over the course of a season. Namely, how many games did they help the team win? Sounds simple, but if you know anything about baseball, you know that there's batters who hit the ball and there's pitchers who throw the ball, and actually they have very different jobs. Apart from in some leagues where some pitchers have to bat, but in others they don't. Also, some pitchers start the game and they do about half, if not the full game, so they'll do 5 to 9 innings, but sometimes they'll do 2, but they only do 1 game in every 5. And then there'll be relief pitchers who tend to do every game, but not every game, but sometimes they'll come in, they'll do 1, 2, 3 innings, sometimes less, sometimes more. And then there's closers as well, but closers only come in for the last inning if the team is winning. So they're already in a winning position, they just need to get 3 people out. Whereas batters, they only bat 3, maybe 5 times in a game, maybe more if the team plays really well. But also, when they're not batting, sometimes they're fielding, unless they're a designated hitter. And when they're fielding, they're doing different things. Some of them just catch, some of them just throw, some of them don't move, some of them run around. It's very confusing because essentially everyone is doing a different role in a different way, and they're doing different volumes of it. So how do you quantify who should you give your big new contract to, your star pitcher or your star batter? Well, Bill James figured it out. He created a metric called wins against replacement, otherwise known as WAR. Very simple. You figure out statistically how many runs, how many outs, how many catches, how many errors, how many things that you need to get a win. Then you just compile all the actions for all the different players doing their own different roles within the game. You adjust and normalize, so if someone hits a home run, but they hit the home run in a tiny little stadium at, sort of in Colorado, where they're high above sea level and the air's thin, you normalize that for if they were hitting in a regular stadium. Same as if they hit them in Kansas City, which is a massive stadium, you would then normalize their score, so that everyone is theoretically playing in the same stadium and they're on the same playing field. And then lastly, you look at the opportunity cost. You look at, okay, productivity, but compared to a replacement player. So every baseball team has a minor league system, which is like a reserve team, where there are other players that you could just bring up, right? For example, if I was in a baseball team and a team let me play a full season, which is 162 games, at some point I would be productive. Mainly because if you get hit by the ball when you're batting, you get a walk. So, yes, I would be probably productive in some way if I played a whole season of baseball, but should you hire me as a baseball player? No, because I would be far, far worse than just bring up anyone else from your minor league team, right? So we need to look at the opportunity cost rather than just pure output and productivity. Now, HR, how would you use this approach? Well, it's pretty simple. We define high performance. What does high performing talent look like? Is it just performance? Is it performance and engagement? Do we need to have a cost lens? Does it need to be cost effective? Is collaboration part of high performing? This is going to be very much down to each individual organisation to define. But once we've defined it and we found metrics that we can measure these against, what we can do is we can compute those actions. We can think about different roles doing different things, all things that are leading to our definition of winning, our definition of high performance. Then we adjust to normalise. If we are using, say, engagement survey results, we may want to normalise the results because there are cultural differences between South America and, say, Europe. And actually, we don't want a metric that just says, hey, you should just promote all your managers in South America if there is a cultural dynamic that people are more positive within surveys within that territory. So we need to normalise a little bit. And then we also want to look at the opportunity cost. So rather than just saying, is this person useful, is this person productive, we want to think about, okay, are they more productive? How much more productive are they than if we were to replace them, if we were to hire someone else or find another person to do this role? Now, that's the theory. If you're not into theory, I've done a quick mock-up of how I've used this before in previous organisations and previous roles. This is using fictitious data, so if you're interested I can share the data with you in the full analysis, but essentially looking at an organisation that went through a large growth spurt, hired a lot of people in the last year, and they wanted to know, okay, what's the best talent pipeline, what's the best recruitment source, so you're hiring new talent, but also is that talent coming in and performing at a same or similar level to the incumbents who got the company to where it was. So we define high performance in terms of talent as the high performing, they're engaged, and they're a strong cultural fit. We find different data sources like performance scores, like engagement survey results. We think about turnover as well. So actually, do they leave very early on? Do they feel like they're a strong fit within the organization? But other things as well, such as bonuses and awards, and even tardiness to understand. Let's get some quantitative data rather than just subjective pulse survey results. So we aggregate these, we have a scoring method that we agree with the client, and then we can calculate performance against replacement. So here we can see basically the employee referral program seems to have the best productivity against replacement score. It's interesting, if you look to the far end, is actually incumbents have the lowest productivity against replacement. This is really driven by, okay, there's some low performance and not great engagement, but really it's the company fit. What this company is seeing is it's hired a whole load of people in who are judged to be performing at a higher level and super engaged. We found is those people who are the incumbents who were there originally are now leaving at a dramatic rate. So actually right now, looking at how the metric is calculated, you're better off hiring new people in rather than trying to retain those incumbents. But I wanted to also look at how we can maybe adjust and normalize the scores, right? So we're going to adjust here for critical talent, right? Not all replacements are the same. If you were to get rid of or lose an employee, actually, if they're in a critical role, they're going to be more valuable. It's going to be harder to fill that critical role, especially we use this approach when we look at uniqueness of role as part of our framework for critical roles. So if we then weight the scores, we keep production the same raw score, the same productivity against replacement score, but we add additional weighting to the IT, IS, software engineer, and exec office roles. Now if we recalculate, suddenly we're seeing some of these other recruitment sources improve in terms of productivity against replacement scores. Definitely Indeed, definitely our other, and also job fairs making a move. Employee referral scheme is still quite strong, but you can see LinkedIn and Google searches are dropping back. This could be because LinkedIn is very good for, say, basic roles in this example, but actually it's not really giving us a strong pipeline for critical talent. Now, let's throw a hypothetical out there. I know there's ethical issues with this, but let's imagine the organisation also has diversity targets. Maybe it's committed to a certain amount of females in senior management roles by a certain time. Well, again, let's adjust the scoring system to reflect a little higher and give weighted scores to diverse talent. And here we see the employee referral scheme has dropped back. job fairs seem much more productive, as well as Indeed and other, right? So this is just a hypothetical example. We'll talk about ethics later. It's just an example of how we can use productivity against replacement as a metric for, say, talent pipeline analysis, but you can also use this for, measuring if training has had an impact, or leadership programs, or if your ERGs are working. We should see higher productivity against replacement for those who are attending versus those who aren't. Now, this is very much like talent pipeline analysis, but this approach has always been a bit of an itch for me to scratch, because essentially what we're doing is we're calculating scores at an individual level, right? So just like in baseball, where we have WAR, we have a distribution curve, and your all-stars and your legends and your MVPs are in those tiny little bars down at the bottom from between 5 and 7.5 WAR. We also have distribution curve for our analysis, right? Now, this isn't a huge sample size, so there is one outlier between 8 and 10 WAR, but essentially what we have is a very easy to understand metric where we're highlighting, actually, in that far right corner, we have a few superstars. It also, and we'll talk about ethics in a minute, it also highlights where maybe we have employees who are falling below that productivity against replacement. Maybe this is the line where we need to look at in terms of performance improvement plans, or look at retraining, reskilling, job sequence, but this is where we need to take action on employees who are not yet productive. So, going back to the ask, I'm doing my Masters. I think this is an idea that I'd like to investigate over the next 3 months, looking for your feedback. Here's what I'm proposing to do. 1, create a framework, look at how do we define this high-performing talent, how do we categorize employees into roles, so we probably need a different scoring metric for individual contributors versus managers versus senior leaders, and maybe some specialist roles, sales or operational frontline, customer service center, etc. But how do we categorize a few different roles into different groups so that we have a slightly different scoring method that works for everyone? Then how do we identify data sources for each of those different roles? How do we use common data sources to create a simple to understand but effective score where we can measure all those different types of roles against each other? The second thing is understanding how do we calculate the level of a replacement, right? For the example we saw, I used a very simple assumption-based approach, which is, look, you're going to have 3 months to hire them, so there's 0 productivity. You then have half productivity as they kind of ramp up over the first 6 months of their tenure, and then potentially you have full productivity between months 9 and 12. So we just take 1 year's of productivity and essentially half it. But there's probably a much smarter way of doing this, right? Again, not all roles are the same. So can we leverage talent intelligence to understand, okay, this employee in this role, looking at the local job market, looking at the supply and the demand of talent, the competitiveness, actually, can we have different levels of replacement for different roles? And also, and this is probably the bit that some of you are waiting for, should we do this? Is it fair that we judge someone's productivity level lower because they're based in London, where there may be a whole load of people with SEO or whatever skills available in the market, versus someone in Turin or Jakarta or Auckland, where actually maybe the market might be different and actually it would be a lot harder to replace them? There's also some things that we've got to be clear we can't do, right? Yes, for talent pipelines, we might care about diversity. We might give a higher weighting to talent pipelines that are actually driving better, more diverse candidates. But we really can't adjust people's productivity at an individual level and make talent management decisions just because they're a female or they're part of minorities. So understanding how do we do this, how do we ethically use the data, and actually maybe we need a couple of different versions of the metric, one to judge individual productivity versus one that was used at the organizational level on an aggregated basis that is aligned to certain priorities. And how should we use this? What are the different things we can use? How should we do it? Should we make individual decisions? How should you use a metric once you've agreed it? So these are some of the things that I want to investigate as part of my dissertation. I also want to work with organizations to essentially understand what kind of data you need, how would you define talent, to really check my thinking, but also potentially try some beta analysis and do some research with. So if you're interested, either you hate it or you love it, please do reach out. Also keep checking back because I will be releasing more videos in the next week around my other 2 ideas that I have for the thesis. But for now, please do comment, please do reach out, and whether they're good or bad, I would love to hear your opinions and thoughts, especially as if something that you would be appealing to you that you would like to collaborate on. Anyway, I'm at my 15 minutes. Thank you for spending the time with me, and I hope this wasn't a complete waste of your time.